I'm Georgina Hall, and this is the Female Empowered Podcast, inspired by the casual conversations I've had with thousands of women over my career in coaching. This is not just another wanky women's wellness podcast. We are bringing the uprising. Hi friends, welcome to the Female Empowered Podcast. I am your host, Georgina Hall, personal trainer, online coach, and offerer of opinions. Hello, welcome back. You may have noticed we've had a little break from the podcast, so I hope it's given you all a chance to catch up with the older episodes. If you have enjoyed the episodes, then if you wouldn't mind, I would really appreciate if you've got maximum 60 seconds to go on to Apple Podcast and leave us a rating and review. That would be amazing. It really helps us to spread the word and get into more people's ears. And if you wouldn't mind, share it with someone who you think might enjoy it as well. So tell your friends. We've had a little short break just to get busy with in-person training again since restrictions started to be lowered in the UK. So I've been in the backyard training lots of people, back with in-person clients. If you want to know how you can work with me, if you go to www.georginahalltraining.com, you can log onto there, find out all the ways that you can work with me, drop me an application and get in touch. Today on the podcast, I am speaking to Amy Lavelle, who is a psychotherapist. We had a really interesting chat about all things therapy, talking about the stigma, talking about why everybody should have a therapist if you can. So I hope you enjoy the chat. Here it is. Hi, Amy.
Hi, Georgina.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I've got a few questions for you today. I think this is going to be a really interesting chat.
Mm-hmm.
And I often say, in fact, I say it on most episodes of this podcast, no matter who I'm speaking to, everyone needs a therapist.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I have a therapist.
Well, don't therapists have to have therapists?
Yeah, well, when they're training, when I trained for, I've trained for kind of many years and I had to have 2 years of personal therapy. So most therapists, especially psychotherapists and psychologists, are expected to have kind of 2 years of personal therapy to work through some stuff. Every therapist as a general has a clinical supervisor. I suppose, you talk about your cases and maybe also kind of some stuff, of your own stuff that maybe comes up with your client. But most therapists do have therapists. But yeah, I agree. I think everybody should have a therapist.
Do you think that it's important because you take on a lot of other people's stuff that you then need somewhere to put it? Or do certain things from clients trigger you so that you personally want to speak to a therapist?
Yeah, I think I would probably say, I think definitely for me, it's probably more of the second one. But also a bit of both. If you're a trauma therapist, for instance, and you're working with a lot of clients who present with trauma, and that's kind of day in and day out, you're vulnerable to experiencing what we would call vicarious trauma, which is becoming traumatized through somebody else's story and the stuff that they bring. So that's kind of one of the reasons. Another one is because as therapists are human beings as well that have had their own life experiences. And often you can sit with a client who might have a story that parallels with yours. Their stuff can very much sometimes bring up stuff that is going on within you, and you need to be able to separate what's mine, what's the client's, not bringing your own stuff into the room. And it is, that's sort of a big thing, that you need to be able to talk that out, and have somebody, a therapist, clinical supervisor, who's able to point that out to you and work through that, so you're not bringing that into the room with the client.
Yeah, interesting. Like, you're not putting your stuff on someone else, because I guess people do that like just throughout conversation, don't they? If someone is kind of struggling with something or wants to get something off their chest, a lot of people tend to respond with how that ties into what's happened to them. Oh yeah, that happened to me once. Or, oh yeah, when that happened to me, I did this. And I think probably it's more important sometimes to be able to step aside from that and just let people vent, even in normal life, not in therapy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I mean, some of that is helpful, when you've got, that's helpful for someone to have someone to relate to, that I went through this, and, I can really empathize with, what you've gone through. But yeah, just in normal day-to-day conversations, sometimes that can happen, where, somebody goes, oh, I've been through this and this is how I dealt with this and you should do this. And sometimes that's helpful, sometimes it's not helpful.
Yeah. I don't care what happened to you. I just want to tell you about my thing. We've already got a little bit deep in this chat, and I have some questions based already off what you said. So before we go any further, I want you to introduce yourself so that we know exactly kind of who you are, what you do. How would you describe what you do?
Okay. So my name's Amy Lavelle. I'm a psychotherapist. I work integratively. Integratively means that I'm trained in more than one therapeutic model. So instead of somebody coming and me doing pure CBT or maybe pure psychodynamic, what I tend to do is draw different elements from different models, and I tend to just tailor treatment to that client. So really kind of all my clients get a very unique experience, and probably their sessions are not the same as maybe somebody else. So I mean, I've been in the mental health field for, let's forget how old I am. 9 years. 9 years, nearly 10 years I've been in the mental health field. And I've worked kind of in alcohol addictions. I've worked in forensics, in psychiatric wards. I worked in IAPT for quite a few years as both a counsellor and a CBT therapist. And I have also worked in secondary care for clients who were dealing with psychosis. So I've had quite a breadth of kind of experience, which has kind of been really helpful, I think. And then leading me to where I work. Well, where I work now, or the place, sorry, that I'm in, the type of therapist that I am, is I work very holistically. I've come away from a medicalized model, even though I still bear that in mind, of sort of diagnosis and sort of treatment of symptoms, which it is helpful, and I still maintain an awareness of that. But rather than being driven by that, I look at the person as a whole, very holistically. I mean, there's a lot of symptom overlap with a lot of different things, and we all have traits of different things. And for some people, treating the symptoms is helpful. If they've got a strong genetic history of anxiety and depression, say. For others, however, a lot of it can come from life experiences or learned behaviors. So yeah, I'm very adaptable. I think it's probably the best way that I can describe it.
Yeah, awesome. That sounds a little bit like the holistic psychologist. I'm reading her book at the moment, so it ties in like psychology models, but also movement, nutrition, gut health, so for all round overall well-being, I would say.
There's so many different components, and I think probably, even though like I'm trained in CBT, one of the criticisms I've probably had of it is that it can tend to treat the mind and the body very separate. And so that's what kind of I'll draw on kind of elements of it and maybe mix it with something else, and it's about actually bringing those two together. So as you say, there's so many different elements and components to emotional well-being. There's a lot of research now. It's a big thing is about gut health. There's a lot of links between nutrition and mood. The effects of kind of exercise, relationships. So there's lots and lots of different components. But I love the holistic psychologist.
Yeah,
she's awesome.
Like she talks about boundaries in such an obvious and succinct way that you're like, oh shit. Like sometimes I'll like pass things on to like, if we haven't chatting sessions with clients and they're like, oh, someone wants me to do this and I don't really want to, or somebody has invited me here and I don't want to go, and I'm like, you need to read the holistic psychologist chapter on boundaries, because she just tells you straight. And you're like, oh, it just really needs to be that simple. Why can we not communicate that simply with people?
Yeah. It's another probably good read is Feel a Fear and Do It Anyway by Susan Jeffers. It's a very old book, but it's a very good book, and she talks a lot about that, you know, in that a lot of the language we use when somebody asks us to do something and we say that we can't, you know, and it's about actually taking some of that power back, and that most of the time you can, but actually you're choosing not to. And actually about communicating that, which is, you know, well, you know, I could do that, but actually I'm going to choose not to. And actually this is more important to me, or this is really important that I actually stay and do this. And it's about kind of taking that power, you know, back.
Because people think they need an excuse, don't they? Like, I've been invited to a party on Friday and I don't have an excuse. I don't have a reason why I can't go, so I'm going to have to go. Or you could just say, thanks for the invite, not this time, but maybe next time, because not having any plans is still a plan.
Yeah, and it's so important, you know, and sometimes I'll say to people, you know, I mean, I definitely need that time. I need time to do nothing. You know, that's kind of what I need. My self-care and a wind down is just have absolutely no plans at all, you know, and for people to actually sometimes schedule that into your diary so that is a plan, because it's very easy sometimes if you've got no plans and something else and somebody asks you to do something, is for you to just deprioritize that. For actually having no plans and not doing anything is important. And you know, you don't need an excuse, you don't need to justify yourself, you know, why you don't want to go somewhere. You know, but I think a lot of people can worry about, you know, upsetting somebody else, or, and again, it comes to that needs. And I think it's really important for people to remember that, you know, I am just as important as that other person, not less so, not more so, you know. And even though, you know, somebody might want you to go to a party, you know, and you may feel bad for kind of saying no, so you make up an excuse, but, you know, actually it's, sometimes it can be more empowering to be authentic, which is, you know, thanks for the invite, but actually, you know, it's really important that I just lay on the couch and be a cabbage, because I really, really need to do that.
Yeah. I guess part of it is like trying to control the other person's view of you, in that they'll think you're a horrible person if you just say nah.
Yeah.
But that's on them, isn't it?
It is. And I suppose that stuff we get into a little bit more complex things, such as kind of our beliefs about ourselves. Why is that important to you? Yeah, I think that's complex conversation.
People pleasing. I might want to come back to people pleasing.
Yeah.
But I'm just going to go back. We'll just jump back and forth throughout this. Because you mentioned that you use a lot of different types of therapy in your work. So if somebody is kind of sat listening and they're thinking that they would like to try therapy for whatever reason, and I think a big thing to say is I think there's a bit of a stigma attached to it, especially in this country, but you don't have to have something wrong, quote unquote, with you to speak to a therapist or to get therapy. So what would you advise people who are kind of in a contemplatory stage? Is that a word? It is now.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of stigma, I think we're getting better. Society is getting better. But it's still very much an issue about, you know, there has to be something wrong for you to go to therapy. You know, I still have clients sit down and they don't tell people that they come in, or even they haven't told their partners that they come in, you know, because they're worried about what they'll think, or, you know, that I'm crazy, or, you know, I need to be here. And it's not the case at all. I mean, I have so many different clients. I have clients who, yes, are unwell, you know, mentally, but as you know, none of us kind of avoid that. And I think I would really like for us to kind of come away from that stigma, because, you know, if somebody reacts differently to themselves if they have an anxiety disorder, for instance, but actually if somebody had a heart condition, thyroid condition that produced symptoms, you know, they would respond quite differently to themselves. You know, there's not that same stigma attached, you know, but at the end of the day, the brain is an organ, you know, the most complex organ in the body. You know, there shouldn't be this distinction. But as well as I have clients who are unwell, I've got clients who just come for personal development, you know, kind of personal growth. You know, and I massively kind of advocate for that. I think it's one of those things that if you haven't been to therapy, I think it's very easy to assume kind of what it is, but often it's very different than what you imagine it to be.
Because we see it in films and stuff, don't we? And it's like lying on the couch, and you know, like we still look at it like kind of Freudian.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is a little bit of like if I would go, oh, I'm off to therapy, or I'm off to seeing a therapist, and people are like, oh, why? Or like, what's the matter?
What's
like,
wrong? Yeah.
I like talking about myself for an hour, and it's better to pay someone to do that rather than do it to your mates. Might learn something.
Yeah, and you know, there's something in that about having that hour, you know, even for some people who are so busy, and they really struggle to have that time to just do nothing, or, you know, kind of delve into themselves. You know, having that hour with that therapist, that hour is just purely, and it's all about you. You know, and having that space. I mean, I had a client a while ago who came, and we barely spoke. We had a full session in silence. You know, and at the end, it was really quite powerful, actually. And at the end, she said, you know, I really needed that. You know, so it's not all about, you know, talking. And,
so when you sat in silence with someone, like you and them in a room for an hour, didn't speak, what was going through your mind?
So I'm very much just present with, I mean, I use a lot of silences anyway. You know, sometimes people get quite uncomfortable with that. So I do tend to kind of watch their body language and not torture them too much by sitting in silence. But what I'll normally say to people is, you know, when I do give you that silence, what I'm doing is giving you space, you know, to just be present with what you're feeling, allow just what's going on in your mind. You know, but and sometimes silence says a lot, you know, and can be very loud, and you can pay attention to actually what's going on in that silence, you know. And somebody becomes very uncomfortable, it's actually, you know, so your face is uncomfortable, would you be uncomfortable?
I'm like, right, so like a big pause before answering a question or like thinking, but if it went on too long, I would no longer be reflecting, I would not be inward, I would be going, what the fuck? Like,
so I wouldn't do that with you. What I would probably do is give you little sprinkles of silence, and I would pick up on your body language that actually
I actually have like a little knot now in my chest.
Okay.
The thought of sitting in silence for that.
That's interesting, Georgina. We should explore that.
Yeah, we maybe should. Wow. So when I've lost my complete train of thought just from that thought of silence there, it's like meditation, you know, when people are like, oh, I can't meditate. I'm like, well, you can, and it doesn't have to be for that long. Like, you don't have to sit in silence for an hour. You could do it for a minute, and then maybe in a couple of weeks go for 2 minutes. But that's what I was going to say there is, do you think some people are scared to come to therapy because they're not sure what it'll bring up?
Oh, completely. You know, therapy takes a lot of courage, hell of a lot of courage. And, you know, I'll say that to all my clients, that it's to be very brave to come to therapy. You know, even though you're in control, you know, you're completely in control. And no therapist should ever, you know, push you beyond your means that you can tolerate. And you are in control. But with therapy, with anything that you're going to delve into yourself and explore, you know, your thought patterns, you know, maybe, you know, why you pick the partners that you choose, it's going to bring some stuff up, you know, and you've got to be in a place, you know, to, I suppose, kind of have that courage to deal with that. Really, and not everybody's ready for that. It might come kind of later in life. You know, there's a reason why sometimes people have been through stuff in life, you know, early in life, and they don't address it and go to therapy until years and years and years later. And sometimes that comes from that they need to be in a safe place, you know, and they need to be in that right place where everything around them is safe and stable for them to be able to address that. You know, for some people who are coming for personal development, say for instance, you know, there's still always, you know, the risk that that's going to bring up something. You know, and as well as we all have faults within us, we have good and bad, you know, and it's it's not nice, that kind of part of being able to kind of look at, right, okay, what is my role in relationships? If people kind of tend to react to me like that, okay, what am I doing, to kind of elicit that response? And that's not nice.
If you think that everyone you come across is an arsehole,
yeah,
you are probably the arsehole.
I'd probably word it maybe a little bit more gentler than that. But yeah, there's something going on there about, what is that? Where's that thinking pattern come from? What is it that's going on with you? And if people are reacting to you in a certain way, is there, not always there's not. Sometimes it can be that you can attract certain people, and that again can come from certain patterns, or that you're drawn to certain types of people who may be not good for you. And sort of that's another path. Or it could be that you tend to elicit responses from people, and it's what is it that you're giving off, or how do you think that people feel around you? It might be that a lot of people are quite defensive and quite abrupt, and that they're not aware of it. I suppose it's coming to therapy as if it's coming into an awareness, really, and it's coming to the good things and the not so good as well.
And taking some responsibility for stuff, because I guess if you're kind of going through life thinking everything's someone else's fault, like I'm treated like this at work, and I'm treated like this in my relationship, and I'm treated like this by my family, then kind of taking the responsibility of going, what am I giving to the situation at work, in life, in my family, in my relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. And responsibility, accountability, but not always responsibility is okay, what am I doing? Because I don't want people to, assume that, right, okay, well, I'm being treated a certain way. What am I doing to deserve that?
Like
responsibility,
fault, but
yeah. But also, I suppose that responsibility also plays in to about, for example, if somebody's, being treated a certain way by colleagues, repeatedly, and it's been going on long term, it's like, right, okay, what responsibility can I take, that is allowing that to continue, that I'm allowing people to continuously treat me this way or behave that way. So absolutely, I think that kind of comes bottom of it is also that, responsibility, and then what is my responsibility,
Yeah, that's interesting.
But it's important not to take all of the responsibility, because when we talk about relationships, it's very much shared, and it's just taking what belongs to you and not taking
your bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big thing, isn't it? Like, it's not necessarily your fault, but how you react, how you deal with things, what you do with what you're getting is your responsibility, and it's in your power. It's what you said before, it's very empowering, isn't it, that to then take control and say, that's not mine, so yeah,
absolutely.
Or not. Awesome. Right, I'm gonna chuck some questions at you, if you don't mind. I've got some questions from Instagram, from my clients, from Facebook, so can I throw some of those at you?
You certainly can.
Do we need to start with a disclaimer in that no one's going to get therapy via this podcast? If you've asked a question, you're going to get a generic answer.
Yeah, it will be very generic answer, because certain questions that people ask, it's lots of different reasons for things. There's different complexities, different contexts, different situations. So so the answers that I'll give will be quite generic. Okay,
well, I've got a couple of good questions related to the stuff that I do, training, nutrition, body image. The first one is, what can cause an all or nothing mindset, and do you have any tips on breaking that cycle?
Okay. We have different thinking patterns. Our brains have patterns in the way that it thinks. Normally in CBT, you'll call it unhelpful thinking styles, unhelpful themes of thinking, but ultimately they're thinking patterns. All or nothing, sometimes called absolute thinking, black and white thinking, is a pattern of cognitions. It's a pattern of thinking. Now, there's lots of different types of patterns, unhelpful patterns. So, for example, there's catastrophizing. There is kind of should and musting, which is I should always do this, I should be feeling that, I must do this. Mind reading, which is always assuming that kind of, you know, that's the thinking this of me. Or so if somebody walks past, they don't smile at me, or, you know, they hate me if you know I've done something. And also all or nothing mindset is one of those patterns. We all do to some degree kind of all of these unhelpful thinking patterns, but we will probably find that we tend to dominate in maybe one or two. For example, mine is catastrophizing. There's nothing much I can do about that. That is just the way that my brain is programmed.
Is it like, say, if someone's late, then they must have had a horrible accident? And
yes, worst case possible thing that could have happened, you know. So now I'm able to kind of obviously recognize that and go, right, okay, that's a catastrophic thought, and it's like it's a possibility. I can't rule that out that that's happened, but also it could be kind of A, B, C, D. You know, and that's just the way that my brain is wired. For some people, the way that their brain dominates is with all or nothing mindset. So if you think of it on a spectrum, some of us may do that all or nothing. Again, I do it. I'm often like that at the gym. I'll go to the gym 3 times a week. I'm like, yes. And then I'll miss 4 days. And then I'll be like, right, okay, it's over. It's done. Might as well just never go back ever again. So I do it, and I'll probably swim around that kind of lower end of the spectrum. For some people, if they really dominate in that mindset, it's really quite difficult. You know, and it's common if you suffer with anxiety, especially sort of depression, if you're a perfectionist, to have that all or nothing mindset. And I suppose it's kind of figuring out what's driving that, you know, what is driving that kind of thought pattern. But it's really difficult. You know, some people can, you know, if they're on sort of a health kick, and they've been eating really well for a week, and then they have a day where, you know, they have like a pack of Oreos or a pack of Jaffa cakes, which is okay. You know, sometimes I'll do that. You know, but then instead of kind of then getting on it the next day, it's like, right, okay, that's
or even the day, because that is something that I see a lot of. If someone is, it's why I don't like people feeling like they're on a diet. Again, you don't need to be on a diet, because people get I'm either on or off it. And the same kind of thing goes if they're training, they're eating well. And then suddenly they're not training, so they stop eating well. Or like you say, they have one high calorie meal on a weekend and then think, well, I fucked the whole thing now, so I'm just gonna get a Greg's for lunch and McDonald's for tea, and then I might go out on the piss and have hangover food all day tomorrow. You don't need to do that. You can have high calorie foods, or you can do a little bit of it or a little bit off it, like take little bits, but you don't need to do on or off.
It's a cycle. I actually drew new because I thought, when people ask me questions, it normally comes up, and then I get to show my little diagrams. It's a bit messy. I don't know if you can see.
On YouTube, if you're watching on YouTube, Amy is holding up a diagram. If you're not watching and you can only hear us, we've got a
I'll try and explain sort of what it is. Now, sort of this kind of site, I call it a hamster wheel, because once you're on it, it's just you spin, or like a washing machine. It's hard to switch it off. But what happens is you tend to have a trigger, which might be that, you know, you eat a pack of Oreos after you've had a full day of, you know, eating really well. That triggers off a thought. Now, if you've got an all or nothing mindset, or you dominate in kind of the all or nothing, then straight away those thoughts that you're going to get is that, you know, right, I always do this. I always manage for 4 days, and then I always just binge, and then I've ruined it. That's then going to trigger off an emotion, more than likely, you know, that you're going to feel really, really crap about that. You might then start to feel anxious. You might even, some people can even feel quite depressed, you know, with that all or nothing mindset. You know, it's jumping to that kind of under end of the extreme where you feel great that you've been doing something, you know, and then you start to get those thoughts, which is like, okay, it's ruined. You know, it's over. I always do this. You know, I always kind of mess up. You know, my diet, I always mess up. This. So you can imagine that's going to make you feel pretty crap. Some people have physical kind of symptoms, depending on whether if you've got anxiety, for example, or kind of depression. You know, that's going to really kind of hit off in terms of headaches, feeling fatigued, heavy feelings, racing heart, things like that. But then you've also got your behavior. Now that behavior tends to follow as a result of what's gone on here. And that's normally when people are okay, they don't go to the gym, they drop out. They then the next day will then start on eating takeouts, they'll binge more. And then that then exasperates this thought, and then you just get locked into that cycle. As for breaking it, where we would want to break it is at the thought bit. Now obviously it's a lot for me to go into, is obviously Georgina, that's something that we'll cover on the program. But where you want to break that is having an awareness of actually.
I'll just pause for a second where you dropped that in on the program, which we'll tell the people about later, because we have written a program together that covers therapy and personal training and nutrition all in one stop wellness shopness. So we will talk about that later. We're not on the sales, we're not, I promise.
Yeah, so hopefully that'll be really helpful. But I suppose it's in breaking it, it's holding an awareness and starting to become really aware of the way that your brain thinks. A really good way of doing that is thought tracking. So you might want to write down the thoughts that you have throughout the day. Now, just take care of yourself, I think, if you're going to do that, because it can be really overwhelming, especially if you have a lot of intrusive and a lot of negative thoughts. It can be quite overwhelming to see all of that down in black and white. But what you would do is you would start to notice what kind of thoughts you have. If there's a lot of, I should be doing this, I must be doing that, I always binge on this, I'm no good on that, then what you can do is you can start to identify actually, what kind of thinking patterns is going on here.
Yeah.
So if you've got a lot of the, that all or nothing mindset, it's being able to be aware of, right, okay, that I've got this thought, right, okay, this is that all or nothing mindset. And then it's being aware and then breaking that cycle with the behavior. So if you're prone to doing that, and then you know that you're going to drop out of the gym the next day, it's actually being aware of that behavior and forcing yourself to do something different. It's about kind of breaking that cycle, if that makes sense.
Definitely. It's interesting actually, because your diagram is very similar to what I use with emotional eating, which I get asked about a lot. With nutrition clients, if they are prone to having a bad day at work and therefore getting home and the first thing they do is open the cupboards, I call it creating space between the thought that is on your diagram and the action of eating the biscuits. And the way that I get to kind of coach people into creating a bigger space is through meditation, journaling, which is kind of what you just said, but yours sounded much scarier than you're like, be careful, because once you see it written down in black and white before, I'm like, just write a little journal. Like, how are you feeling when you do that? How does this make you feel? Is there something else that you could do instead?
I suppose if you've got a mind like mine, I have a lot of intrusive thoughts, and if I'm to write that down on paper, it's like, wow, does that really go on inside of my head? But yes, journaling is another way of kind of doing that. I suppose the difference is you would just kind of refocus on those thoughts. But yeah, journaling is a really another good strategy.
That's probably why it's a good combo, you and I, because I'm a bit like, just chill.
Yeah.
Don't worry about the thoughts. Write them down, but don't forget about it. Like, what do those thoughts tell us about you? My next question, moving on from all or nothing mindset. By the way, the quote that I like, I don't know if you're a fan of Star Wars, I am. And my brother's a therapist. So when we talk about that, we say absolutes. When someone says, I always do that, or I never do that, he says, only Siths deal in absolutes. If you you'll not get, but it's a thing. Someone else wants to understand body dysmorphia, interesting question, and body image issues.
Yeah, that often comes up a lot. Get sick of me talking about spectrums. If anybody knows me, she's like, oh, she's going on about spectrums again. But if we have a spectrum, if we have a spectrum, it's very common for people to have, body image issues. And body image issues, there may be something particular that, you're really self-conscious about. It might be kind of everything wholly that, your body's changed. That's really common, especially for people who kind of move into their 30s and their 40s from their 20s, the body changes.
I'm actually experiencing that now.
Yeah, me also.
Like, and I'm 33 now, and I actually am like looking at myself in a different way.
Things don't stay where they used to, do they? Or
well, I've never had boobs ever, and now suddenly I'm 33, and my body's like, here, have a go.
Here you go.
Already.
So that's really common.
Lockdown again as well, that everyone's
yes. Oh yeah, I think that's a massive issue for a lot of people. Not that it's an issue, and probably bad use of language there, but people find that an issue, and that's something that has really impacted a lot of people. But it's common across the board. I don't know anybody who hasn't, put on a few pounds throughout lockdown. Everyone being very kind of sedentary, and it's been a really difficult time. But yeah, you've got kind of sort of body image issues, that can stem from, lower self-confidence, and increasing that probably, which see sort of a shift in that. Now, further up the spectrum, we've got things like body dysmorphia. Now, people can have traits, like I've talked about before, we can all have traits of things, and we can have traits of body dysmorphia. And then you've got all of the way to maybe kind of full-blown body dysmorphia, which is something, for example, that we may see with people who have eating disorders, and we may see them as being very, very thin, and they may look in the mirror and genuinely see themselves as being fat. So that kind of would be more sort of anorexia. Now that would be an example of that. There's been a lot of research on
body dysmorphia. Sorry, just to interrupt you. Body dysmorphia is where people see something different in the mirror to what other people see them.
Yeah. It's a very painful condition, and I think it's probably one of the hardest. Now, there's been a lot of research where they've done some brain scans actually on people with body dysmorphia, and they've actually found, they're on the way to kind of explain it, they've theorized, to hypothesize that people with body dysmorphia may see things and see objects differently. It's very hard with body dysmorphia because, if I was, for example, if I was to look at, I'm just looking at a lamp, right, and it's gold, I see that as gold, that is fact to me. Now, if somebody else looked at it and everybody else, 10 other people could see, right, okay, well, it's not, it's green.
Like that's that green dress. Do you remember when that went around the internet?
Yes, that drove me mad.
What colour did you do?
But exactly like that, and that's going to be really hard to work with me, for me to be able to possibly kind of have that actually, what I'm saying is that distorted, is that different from what everybody else sees. So
it's a very Buddhist chat now,
Say that again, Georgina.
It's a very Buddhist chat. This is the sort of thing that we talk about in Buddhist school, as I like to call it, where everybody's view of the world is different. Yeah, it's all subjective.
Yeah.
You see everything different to what I see, but I see it as fact. And it's about, to get deep, it's about letting go of that fact, that is attachment to any of these facts, because none of it's real. It's all like the Matrix. And
a lot of what can actually drive body dysmorphia, again, is if we look at those unhelpful thinking patterns. So that's very common in body dysmorphia for people that have that all or nothing mindset, and often strive for an ideal or perfection. Now, what's worrying about that is that the brain gets stuck in that, and actually that ideal doesn't exist. So that goalpost always keeps moving. And it's manageable. If anybody's got that, I would absolutely encourage you to reach out to a therapist. They can be really helpful, and there's lots of kind of ways to work, because it's very painful. It's very, very painful for someone to live with body dysmorphia, and even have issues with body image. It's delicate, complex.
How much do you think body image, probably not body dysmorphia, but body image to a great extent, is conditioned?
Yes, that's an interesting topic.
Kind of who you hang out with,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I certainly see it a lot if I have clients who are presenting with, difficulties with their body image and how they see themselves. There's a correlation with a lot of life experiences, whether that's bullying, whether it's that they've had learned behavior, it's related to a parent who's really struggled.
I really try and get clients who have kids to that point, in that, like, you don't want your kids to see you dieting or you eating differently to how they, because that's, loads of my clients say, like, that's how they've grown up, with parents who are dieting, or they're kind of fixated on their weight or what they look like, and then it just ends up getting passed down, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And sort of our brains are developed rapidly. I mean, up until the age of sort of 25, our brains develop, but particularly in childhood, adolescence, our brains develop very rapidly, and we're very impressionable. So any bullying that goes on, anything that we're exposed to, social media has a lot to answer for. A lot to answer for. That is also massive.
Social media when I was at school, like, I wouldn't want my kid now to even be anywhere near social media, which is unrealistic, isn't it? But I just, like, there's a lot of good things about it, but there's a lot of evil things about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, there is, as you say, there's good things, but there's also bad things, and there's a lot of unrealistic portrayals. And I really like, there's a movement at the minute on social media about people posting unphotoshopped things, or sort of realistic when somebody's holding themselves in a certain pose. And
one of the Scandinavian countries has made it a law now. You have to state whether it's been photoshopped or how it's been edited.
Really? I like that.
I can't remember. I'll have to have a look at that, but I'm pretty sure the Scandinavian countries, they're switched on. They're always ahead of the game. I think it might be Norway have made it a law that you have to state that your picture's been touched up.
Well, that would be amazing. That would be amazing, because I think that's really important.
How realistic do you think that is?
How realistic do I think that is a law?
Yeah, I mean, it's so easy to filter on it, isn't it? Or like turn the whatever it is.
It's not black and white, is it? It's
but
that gray area
as well, so that is a good point.
Yeah. And it's where do you draw that line? It's so, I probably would agree to an extent that it can be conditioned, but also I'm a big believer in kind of suppose being predisposed to things genetically. And I don't mean sort of body image, but I mean about the way that we think, the way that our brains are programmed, the way that we thinking patterns that we have, can make us more vulnerable to experiencing certain things. If somebody,
do you mean like some people would see something on social media and not think about it, scroll right past, and someone else will fixate on that?
Yeah, if somebody particularly suffers with intrusive thoughts, again, all that all or nothing mindset, or they've got kind of perfectionism traits, it's sorry, I'm just thinking as I'm kind of talking, I'm doing that thing, I'm having a conversation with myself in my head, not verbalizing it. But things like OCD, I mean, body dysmorphia is very closely linked to OCD, and one of the the core traits of that is the intrusive thoughts, where some people have thoughts that come in and they swim out. For some people, I'm one of those. I have very intrusive thoughts where that thought chips in and it doesn't swim out, it kind of gets stuck sort of in tar. And that's going to make you kind of, more sort of vulnerable and prone to, experiencing, anxiety around, different things, and that may manifest differently. But especially if you then combine that, if you're someone who has intrusive thoughts, all or nothing mindset, and you combine that with, if you've had experiences such as being bullied, or, you've grown up with parents who, have had unhealthy relationships with their bodies or with food, or even with social media, then that's a breeding ground, really, isn't it?
So what would your tip be for somebody who's listening now, who's the kind of person who fixates on things or ruminates?
I think it would be, often what I would say is whether that's a therapist or a coach or someone who's got awareness who can maybe help you to maybe safely track some of your thoughts, in what kind of thoughts, so that you can then identify, okay, what themes of thoughts is the same thoughts kind of popping up. It would be, it's difficult because again it's quite complex, and I'm trying to answer generically, because one thing I was going to say was about trying to limit your exposure, depending on how you're feeling. But what I don't want to do is encourage avoidance, because really there's something going on there, and it's about, really the ideal thing would be is if you're fixating on something that's really, really impacting your day and how you feel about yourself, if you're scrolling through Instagram, for instance, and it's really impacting you, there's something going on there kind of underneath. And I would always kind of encourage, somebody to kind of maybe delve into that and explore, what's going on there and how to safely be able to manage that.
Yeah. Or weight is obviously a big thing that I coach clients through. If they fixate on weight, is it worth even weighing yourself? If it's going to have such an impact on your day, do you need to know how much you weigh? Most people don't.
Absolutely. So often people who maybe are struggling with body image, I would always kind of encourage is to try and take the weight out of that, and more, you're exercising for other reasons, whether that's mental health because it makes you feel good, trying to focus on, and go inwards and focus on, how am I feeling, and is this kind of making me feel good, so that you're not focusing on a particular goal, and again having things that is giving you a breeding ground so that you can fixate on. It's very easy to fixate on weight, and that fluctuates and changes, but if somebody's kind of put on a pound or 2 pounds, it's very easy to kind of get stuck in that cycle.
Yeah. Just staying on the social media thing for a second. Do you know the kind of Insta versus reality stuff that we see now, where you have, I actually did a live not so long ago talking about thin privilege, and we see kind of fitfluencers now, as I would call them, who are thin, they do have thin privilege, sitting down with their rolls and take a picture of their rolls to be like, this is what a normal body looks like, and they get thousands of likes. But for me, I'm like, by trying to normalize, and I hate that word, it's so abused right now, but by trying to normalize that body, you're actually drawing attention to the body once again. And if we were normalizing it completely, it wouldn't be mentioned, because everybody has roles when they sit down.
I think it's a massive debate, isn't it? And I think I can understand, maybe why they're doing that. But again, what you've got is sometimes maybe in doing that, as you say, you're drawing more attention to the body, and saying that.
I didn't even know I was supposed to worry about that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I can understand the concept behind it, and I think it's a movement that, hopefully kind of is helpful on some level. But as you say, it's a debate where, if that was to continue, and sometimes that can be unintentionally toxic and create another movement where, exactly as you say, somebody who's kind of, I'm naturally thin. If I sit like that, my belly like hangs over a little bit and I've got rolls, and I have never given that a second thought, but again, as you say, I could look on social media and see, and am I supposed to worry about that? Why does that need normalizing? So yeah, I agree with you, it's a debate, isn't it?
I think it comes from a place of good intent, but for me, I'm like, when I see socially acceptable bodies preaching body confidence, and to some extent like positive body image, I'm like, fuck off. Like, it's easy for you to say when you can walk into Topshop and put on a pair of jeans. I can't imagine.
I can understand.
Like how enraged I would be if I was in a different size body that wasn't socially acceptable.
I can understand that, absolutely.
Next question. Oh, I tell you what that is linked to, which we almost mentioned there about passing on stuff to your kids. Someone has asked about passing on insecurities or issues to their kids. How do you try not to?
Okay. First, I want to say is please don't worry about it too much. Parents worry so much. You know, children on the whole are quite resilient. I mean, as long as it's nothing kind of really unhealthy. But what I would probably say is, again, I think it's being aware of your own insecurities, being aware of things that you struggle with, and having open, honest conversations within the family. It's not always inevitable, that if you've got anxiety or you struggle with body image, or relationship with food, for example, that's automatically gonna that your child is gonna automatically follow that. It's not inevitable. Obviously it increases the risk, because children kind of observe everything the parents do, and some of it can be learned behavior. I see it commonly with parents who have anxiety and panic attacks, and it's not something that they can always control around their children, and they worry about, how is that going to impact their children. Again, it's not always kind of inevitable. It may also be sort of genetically that they're naturally predisposed to that, and we can't always control that. In how to manage that, probably what I would say is, again, have just open, honest conversations. I think be aware of, for example, probably a big one is if you know that you have an unhealthy relationship with your body and you're standing in front of the mirror and, really kind of picking at it and, picking at bits that, maybe sort of flabbing a little bit, or paying attention and grabbing your skin, which often kind of people do, and saying awful things to themselves, just to ensure that you're not doing that kind of in front of kind of children.
And if you are doing that, send me a message, because I will help coach you.
Well, yes, you shouldn't be doing that anyway. Being nasty to yourself. With other things, kind of insecurities and anxieties, I think it's being aware of what that may look like and manifest in children. Anxiety, for instance, manifests differently in young people as it does adults, because they're not at that cognitive stage of development where they're able to verbalize things. Children will often talk about having a worry feeling, or that they've got a bad tummy, nightmares, being scared, separation anxiety, things like that. So if you notice any of that, it's intervening early. One of the problems, when we get to adulthood, which we'll see, with kind of our generations, and I hope that it will, now that we've got more of awareness of mental health and emotional health in children, that we'll start to see a shift, as we kind of move through time. But the biggest thing is early intervention. We can't, some children have anxiety, and neither parent have had it, and they're like, how has this happened? But, as I said before about the brain, we can't always control it, but the biggest thing is being aware of signs, when that's manifesting, and again, having open, honest conversations, that this is how we deal with it, and helping them to be able to regulate their emotions. One of the things, for example, is a really good one for children if they have anxiety, is little worry monsters. You can get them worry monsters, and they have a zip on their mouth, and they can write, all of these negative things and worries that they have, and they put it in the mouth of the monster, and he gobbles it all up.
I want one.
They're fabulous. But it's things like that, and I think try not to stress about it too much, as long as it's, nothing that's majorly unhealthy, because it's not always inevitable, but it's having an awareness of your own stuff, and just having open, honest conversations, and being aware, and any signs, that's starting to show, in children and in young people, is just intervening early and giving them the strategies.
I bet you can try so hard not to fuck up your kids that you try not to. I bet as well a lot of kids are suffering with anxiety at the moment just from coming out of lockdown. Like 18 months is a long time in a kid's life to just be at home, or to only see a certain few people, or to have had to socially distance from people. I bet there'll be loads. I've got anxiety about the new world.
Yeah. Well, I actually found that when, normally I don't have problem, I enjoy shopping, I'll go crowded places, don't think anything of it. And I think I went to the Metro Centre and it was really busy. And even I found myself a bit like, ooh, like I feel a little bit kind of uneasy. I don't really like this. And as you say, we've been in this for a long time, but yeah, lots of children and young people have anxiety, and it's been really hard for them. It's such a crucial time in their life that for them to be around their peers,
Yeah.
that they learn things through their peers, and not having that, is really going to have impacted them. As well as just being kind of in a time of so uncertainty. And if you think, us adults have found it really hard, can you imagine kind of that young people and children, how that's been on them, especially younger ones, not understanding, why they can't just go out and see their friends, and, that absence from school. So yeah, definitely lots of anxiety.
Or like not understanding that people aren't just avoiding them. I've got a little pal who's just turned 7 called Teddy, and he'd be like, "Are you coming to our house?" And I'll be like, "I'm not allowed, Teddy." And he's like,
Oh,
"Why?"
yeah.
Boris. He hates Boris now. Says no. This is quite a good segue onto somebody who's asked about COVID anxiety, actually. So someone's asked from Instagram how to manage COVID/vaccine anxiety. And this is something that I've seen and spoken to people about who are scared of getting COVID, but they're also scared of getting the vaccine. And like I feel for them, like it's like being stuck in between a rock and a hard place.
It's so hard because I think on both sides there's a lot of uncertainty. I think the biggest thing that I found, again on social media, is people being very strongly opinionated on certain things, and there's a lot of false information going around in the media. I think with how much this is consumed our lives, it very quickly can become over consuming. I think it's very, very difficult because obviously that apprehension and that anxiety is very normal. And I think I need to be careful in answering this, and not to put my opinions, because I don't want to do that. But what I would probably say is, I think, try and limit exposure to media about COVID and vaccinations. Speak to people who you trust, who are like-minded, who maybe share some of the same kind of views as you. Talk to people who've had the vaccine. There's a lot of fears about it, understandable.
People that you like and trust as well, and not necessarily family or people who are close, because that's something that I found. People who are kind of close to you feel like they can go, why do you think like that? You should do this. And that automatically makes me shut down.
Backs you into a corner. It does. And I think anyone would shut down. It backs you into a corner, puts pressure on you. So then it's hard to distinguish about what are my views and what's other people's views. Speak to the medicalized profession. Your GP. I know it's really hard to, can everybody get through to my GP? Even like the one that I normally see. I know that's really difficult. If you're lucky enough to kind of have someone that who's in the medicalized profession, but I think limit exposure to media and speak to people who you trust. Do a little survey with yourself. You're worried about the vaccine, try and kind of hunt down people that have had it, and speak to them, how they feel afterwards, kind of any effects that they've had, how they felt about it, and so that you can weigh up all of the options, and come to your own conclusion. But the anxiety is, and as you say, kind of getting COVID, there's so much uncertainty, especially around COVID. But again, I think it's doing things that make you feel safe, especially in the UK now. We've lifted restrictions, and some people are happy to go out. Personally, for me, I'm still going to the supermarket with my mask on. I'm still kind of doing the same things, and kind of happy, kind of living the way that I was really, and seeing small amounts of people. I'm not avoid going to crowded places, but I think that makes me feel safe, and that's okay. But I think you need to come to your own conclusions, and just limit exposure to media, and have breaks, escapism, so that you're not constantly thinking about COVID. I think that's important.
And whatever you do end up choosing to do, will be correct.
For you, yeah.
Yeah, as long as you feel happy with your decision and why you've made it, it'll be the right answer.
Absolutely.
We're going to move on to relationships now, if that's okay. I've got a couple of questions on relationships. The first one, can you come back to a healthy sex life after someone has cheated? This person has a friend. It is genuinely a friend who has forgiven but can't forget in the bedroom.
I'm actually realised I'm actually happy that questions come up. I think a lot of couples wonder that and they don't ask the question.
You do couples
now,
therapy?
I don't work directly with couples. It's something that I'm doing some training on the side. It's probably something that I'm going to work towards. Now, I do sex coaching for couples, but not kind of couples therapy as such. More so, I think it's absolutely possible to have a healthy sex life when there's been infidelity. It's complex and it's difficult for where there's been infidelity in a relationship. Every relationship is different and unique, and every journey is different and looks different. Now, I'm not just saying this because I'm a therapist and biased towards therapy, but I am a massive advocate for couples therapy. Again, a lot of people worry that if I go to couples therapy, it means that my marriage or my relationship is completely on the rocks and we're hanging on by a string, and not always. You know, the way that a couples session would look like would be, right, okay, you know, Mary feels X, Y, and Z, and she's explained that. You know, Bob, how do you feel about that? Do you understand where Mary's coming from? And it might be that, right, okay, Mary, you know, Bob said X, Y, and Z, you know, what's your response to that? It can be really helpful to have somebody just navigate and help pick apart you know, the stuff that's kind of going on. Having sex when there's been an infidelity is a really positive thing, because some people kind of avoid it. It's couples will have sex after there's been an infidelity. They want to connect. They can be scared of losing one another, you know, and when you're very intimate in that way with a partner, you know, you're very vulnerable, and it's a vulnerable situation to be in, and it can be very prone to, you know, those intrusive thoughts coming, especially for the injured party, you know, and for emotions to come up. What I would always say is that where an infidelity is concerned is that two of those partners need to team up, and it's about them against the problem. It's not them against each other. It's not for one person to, unfortunately, I do see that a lot, you know, where one person, one partner will be like, okay, it's done, I don't want to talk about it anymore. You know, you need to find a way to move on from this, you know, and that's not healthy. Both partners have their own feelings about what's happened, and they need to come together and team up. Now, where sex is concerned, foreplay is very important universally. It's known that foreplay is important. You then have sex, whatever that looks like, and the afterplay is something that often not people know is important. Now, after sex, whatever that looks like, whether it's one person's had an orgasm, whether it's you've reached orgasm or not, however that comes to an organic end, is have that afterplay. You know, now that may look different, you know, for some people it's kind of sitting and having that cuddle time, you know, but what I would encourage couples to do is to talk, you know, and that may be a time where one person needs to be very emotionally vulnerable, you know, and even feelings of anger and resentment can come out. And it's important that both partners are able to create a place where that's safe and that's contained for that to come out. And that can be really hard, and which is why I say couples therapy can always be helpful with that, because it's very normal, you know, for the other person's defenses to come up, you know, because often they can feel guilty or they can, you know, regret, you know, whatever's happened, and their defenses can come up, and sometimes then it can create a bit of friction, you know, and actually what we need is a very safe and contained place where both parties are able to team up together and support one another in working through. Especially the injured party will probably have feelings of anger, resentment, intrusive thoughts about the infidelity, and about having that safe environment, where he or she can feel safe to be able to let that out in a way. But it's a very positive sign, if they are having sex and still, indulging in that erotic life, because a lot of people do avoid it, and it can be a good way of, working through, all of those emotions and those processes. Often we're more open, after sex in that vulnerable place that we can talk about things or cry or get angry. So a lot of some couples, will argue after sex, and that's okay. That's bringing all of that out, and it is absolutely possible, and it sounds really positive. But if you're struggling, I think to have that safe, contained environment and be able to communicate, seek the help of a couples therapist.
And have a referee.
Say that, Georgina.
And have a referee.
Yeah. Yeah.
You posted on Instagram this morning about or last night about self-care, and about how it's kind of like it's another thing that's kind of overused at the minute. And when people think of self-care, they think of having a bubble bath and some chocolates and a glass of wine, but actually self-care could be parenting yourself, taking yourself to the gym, taking yourself to therapy. I think therapy is a massive self-care tool.
Totally.
And for a relationship, especially in that kind of situation where you've just described, it shows that you care enough about the relationship to want to make it the best that it can be.
Absolutely.
Rather than it being broken, I need to fix it. How can we make this better? How can we communicate more effectively?
Even, you don't even have to be in a bad place. I mean, I'm very open about my relationship and my marriage, and we've been to couples therapy on 2 occasions. One occasion was when we were in a very bad place, and we needed that. We needed a few sessions to help us just kind of move through that. Even me as a therapist, was not always able to be able to go, right, okay, I feel listened, X, Y, and Z, because I'm a human being. When we've been on a second occasion, which we weren't in any bad place at all, we just wanted to go and explore certain aspects of our relationship, kind of spice things up sexually, look at how we can communicate better and really strengthen that bond between us. So again, from that individual perspective, it can be personal growth. For couples, it can be, enhancing that relationship and finding different ways to communicate with one another. A thing with infidelity is something that's really important, is a lot of people can try and go back to the way things were. A big thing that I think is hard for couples to accept is about that both will need to grieve the loss of what was in that relationship, and actually what needs to come is a new relationship that is birthed from these painful experiences.
Like a phoenix from the ashes.
Yeah. Infidelity doesn't always have to be, something that is the end of a relationship. For some couples, they don't make it through, and that's okay if that's what works for them. But sometimes infidelity can be the making of some couple, but it is about recognizing that, rather than try and go back to the way things were, it's paving the way for a new relationship with one another.
Interesting. So out of this one, so staying on the relationships, someone has asked about prioritizing time together when life is so busy with other stuff. Is this a situation where couples therapy would be useful?
It can be, yeah. Certainly it can be ways of, I certainly got that out when my husband went to couples therapy. We looked at ways that we can prioritize time together, which is what we're both very busy. It's very easy to become passing ships. So you come in, you just stick the telly on, but actually it's what matters is that quality time. That quality time looks different for every couple, and it's worth having a conversation with your partner about what that looks like. What if they would spend quality time together, what would that look like? For some couples. Pardon?
No phones.
Yeah, no phones, no TVs, no distractions. Obviously, have music on the background's okay, but it's too easy to come in and just stick a movie or to sit and watch a movie, you know, and actually it's about connecting, you know, and how can we schedule. And I know that sounds really boring, but unfortunately that comes with life and long-term.
Really, really boring though. We've got this date chart on the wall.
I love
Like
that.
those scratch off ones. So like we can let's have a date this weekend. Let's pick something off the date wall and then pick a date and then scratch it off afterwards.
That's an amazing idea. I absolutely love that. I'm going to pinch that. But yeah, it's such a good idea. You know, having things like that and scheduling time where you can connect, you know, with each other. You know, some couples are really adventurous, or they like to kind of go out hiking or camping. You know, for others, it's just sitting and having a meal together, you know, and talking. Talking about different things and asking, you know, one another kind of how they are. You know, sometimes if couples have been really struggling, you know, to connect, sometimes it can be something as simple as just having 5 minutes where you just sit on the couch and just look at each other and say, hi, how are you? I had a family a while ago who, you know, they had a big family and very, very, very busy life, really, really difficult for them to get any time together, you know, and actually what we looked at was just finding those moments, you know, where they sit down with a cup of tea together and just say hi and ask each other how they are and maintain that eye contact. But yeah, it's all about kind of that connecting, and that might be scheduling time in and protecting that time. And if you have a date night, or a date morning, a date day, if that's in the diary, that needs to be protected and is treated as just as important. Because we can do that, we can deprioritize and take our partners for granted, you know, and if something comes up with a friend we haven't seen in a while, you know, because we live with them, we see them every day, you know, we tend to deprioritize that, and actually it's about not doing that, and protecting that time together.
I guess it's another thing that lockdowns affected, hasn't it? Because people who have been locked down together, like it probably has at some point got to the point where, are you still breathing? Why? And like needing time apart more, but probably the time hasn't been so quality when you've been together, because possibly you have got into a rut, possibly you have got kids. I have a friend who I'm like, when do you ever get laid? Because it's like working in the house, kids in and out, like what do you do?
It's I think lockdown has been hard and put pressure on a lot of relationships.
Make or break, hasn't it?
Yeah, totally. But yeah, as you say, hit the nail on the head. You know, it's that individual time away, actually quality time with yourself. You know, you have a relationship with yourself as well as you do with other people, and actually, it's very important to nurture that. You know, because if you don't, obviously, that's going to be hard to, you know, kind of give your best self, you know, to your partner. So that is just as much a priority in having that time.
It's another thing that I preach to clients a lot, is about improving that relationship with yourself, because if you don't prioritize yourself, you're never going to be in the best place possible to nurture a relationship with someone else in any kind of context. I read a book about 10 years ago now called Be Your Own Life Coach, but it's by Fiona Harold, I think, maybe. I'll put it in the show notes. And the big thing that I've lived off for the last 10 years is her quote, be your own best friend.
Yeah.
And I always think that, and I think it's like we talked about before with the negative self-talk and the body image and stuff like that. And when clients say to me, oh, like, I don't like my thighs and I don't like this and I don't like that and I look shit in shorts, and I'm like, stop. If you had a best mate, would you say to them, don't wear them shorts, you look horrible?
Yeah.
I don't like legs. You won't be friends for very long. They wouldn't want to spend time with you because you're not going to make
exactly.
feel very good. So why are you making yourself feel like that?
Yeah, totally. It's, you know, if you wouldn't say that to somebody else, you know, why is that okay? Why is that okay for you to pull yourself apart like that?
Yeah. I'm probably nicer to myself than I am to anyone else. Apart from plants. I really like my plants. So we touched on it before. We have written a course together. We'll tell the people now. We've written a program that integrates therapy and kind of weight management or body image management from nutrition, training and psychology aspect. And people can join us on the first outing of that course, can't they, from September?
Yeah.
And we will cover a lot of things that we've talked about today, but in more detail and more personalized to you. So if we've mentioned anything at all today where you think I could do with some support or coaching through that, then drop one of us a message or an email, and we'll let you know if we can help. So you can email Georgina at georginahalltraining.com, or you can find me at gptgeorgina on Instagram. Amy, how can we find you?
Well, I have a new Instagram which you can find me, which is a.lavelletherapies, or you can email me at a.lavelletherapies@yahoo.com.
I'll also put those in the show notes so you can find Amy from there. And what would you suggest if somebody thinks I would like to speak to a therapist?
So what I would say is you can use the counselling directory. Obviously, you've got the NHS, which has a lot of waiting times at the minute. If you wanted to go privately, you can go on the counselling directory. You can just Google counselling directory. Will probably be the first one that pops up. Now, on there is a directory and lists of different type of therapists. What's great about that is that they've all been sort of vetted in a sense of that they're registered with an appropriate professional body. Now, what I would encourage is, reach out to a few different ones, and read through their profiles to see if their approach, works for you. The relationship with a therapist is very, very important. And sometimes people, are like jigsaw pieces, they just don't fit together. If they don't fit and you're not comfortable and you're not connecting with that person, chances are is that if that relationship is not there, therapy is not going to work. It's not to say that that can't be worked through, because what I would massively encourage people to do is if you're feeling like that, bring that up with that person, that look, I'm feeling a little bit like this, there could be lots of reasons of what's going on there. A good therapist will sit with you and pick that apart and explore, okay, what can I do differently, or what is it that's, kind of making you feel, uncomfortable, or that you're not connecting with me. There might be something within the relationship that you can work through, or might be that they're just not the right fit. Any therapist, any good therapist, should I say, will be honest and openly talk to you if you were to ask them about their qualifications, about their credentials and their professional body and what level of membership they have. If you ever have a therapist who doesn't, is very closed or bypasses the question, I would find that quite alarming. But yeah, go on the counselling directory and have a look. There's tons and tons of therapists on there, and have a little bit of a read. Some of them offer, like for example, I offer a free telephone conversation. I don't charge for that. Some therapists will charge half price. So it gives you a chance. So I'm really high there, charge price. They charge half price, so it can give you a chance to just have a chat, get a feel for that person, ask them any questions, but yeah, and any questions, you can always either drop me a message, and I'm happy to kind of answer that. Yeah.
Cool. So everyone, go get a therapist if you can.
Therapy.
Therapy for everyone, free therapy. Yeah, if you can, I highly recommend it. Like, I know some people I'm on the NHS wait list, but if you have some spare money that you would usually spend on something, maybe like I said about self-care, bottle of wine and a pizza on a weekend, if you can save it up for a few weeks and get a therapy session instead, that will make a difference to your life. Go get therapy. Amy, thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Oh, thanks, Georgina.
I hope that people have got a lot out of this. Come follow us, come tell us. Drop us a rating if you can. If you've got 60 seconds, drop us a rating. Let us know what you thought to the episode. And we'll talk to you again later. Bye. If you want to improve your well-being in a non-wanky way, you can join hundreds of other like-minded people in my monthly subscription group for live training sessions, daily workouts, nutrition tips, meditations, and more. Only a tenner a month. Email me now, georgina@georginahalltraining.com. Thank you for listening to the Female Empowered podcast. If you want to hear more from us, you can follow us on Instagram @Female Empowered, where you can also get involved with our discussions, and feel free to send us a message.